Chase Mila Falche, which means in Gaelic 100,000 welcomes.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
History is a nightmare from which one must awaken.
Hello again, everyone, and you're very welcome along to the second episode of Deep Diving with myself, Malachy Murray. Well, we had quite the response to the very first episode, in which I talked to a man who talked about the inner workings of your mind, your heart, your soul, your psyche. And that man joins me again today. Mr. Balor O'Brien, you are very, very welcome once again. And look at you, sir. You look even more frightening than you did the last time. Well done.
That isn't really what we're going for.
That's true, of course, but I'm just saying it is a look that evokes so many emotions in so many people. I'll just jump to a few of the people that got in touch over the last week. Sandra in Cavan was so overcome with emotion listening to your tales of folklore and spiritual awakening that she took to the lake near her house purely naked. That's right, she stripped off to her altogether to jump into the waters and try and cleanse her soul, as she writes here, to reconnect with the water spirits. Have you ever encountered water spirits yourself? Actually, before you answer, I'm also to congratulate Sandra on her retirement from teaching. She retired last year. So thank you, Sandra, for that message. Sorry, Bala. Yes, the water spirits.
Well, why wouldn't you go naked? It's us at our most base and our purest. And of course, the lakes in Ireland are full of spirits, and there are all sorts of creatures you will encounter in the lakes and caves of Ireland.
Of course, of course. And hopefully she did follow all the guidelines. It was within her 5 kilometers. We are not encouraging people from breaking the law of the land, as it were. Not yet, anyway. So, Bala, a few more messages. People just wondering about you and your life. Is this something you do full time? Have you committed all of your time to reviving the stories of the land?
Of course, this is my life. This is everything that I do all the time, day and night.
In terms of influences for your look and how you present yourself to the world, some people were wondering, have you watched a little too much Braveheart, for instance? Is that an influence?
No, not in the slightest. What I found very interesting this week was we have a friend staying nearby, an owl, a barn owl. So he has been visiting, and he finds disappearance most calming for him.
There is a feathery look to your face. It looks like the mask is forming a beak just above the handlebar mustache that is shaved in the middle. It is quite the avian look, if you don't mind me saying, and your eyes as well have that piercing hawk-like texture. It's as if you're looking into a field mouse's soul, ready to snatch it from the ground and bring it back to your nest to be eaten alive by your children.
Well, I think you would want to kill it before feeding it to your children.
Of course. And again, we don't encourage live mutilation. So Bala, this week, what are we going to talk about?
Well, there is one figure who is very, very important to Clare, in particular to the area around Kilnaboy in the centre of Clare. And she gets overlooked very often. And really, I suppose I wanted to bring to light how significant she has been. So this is Inion Baoigh, and there is a great misconception about her life and about what she's done. She would have been alive in about approximately 1,500 years ago. She received her land where she built her center around 540 AD, and it was given to her by the chieftain Cahir Con Main. Basically, she established what you would call, I suppose, a feminist pagan society, where she had a group of women who are often described as nuns or spiritualists or spiritual healers, and they operated for many, many years in her site, where actually today you will see the site because it is where Kilnaboy Church stands today.
Kilnaboy Church. And where exactly in Clare are we talking about for people watching from right across the planet, of course? Very popular podcast that we have going here. Where in County Clare is it?
So you will find it if you are coming from Ennis and you are moving up towards Laymanay Castle or up towards the Burren. When you pass Currafin, you can't miss it. It's
outside Ennis is fine. I think most people just know where Ennis is, if even. So that's fine, yes. So go ahead, Inion Baoigh, tell me more.
So she was the daughter of the fertility goddess of the River Boyne. Wonderful. And Baoigh, and he was a wealthy man who served the Inanocht clan, who controlled mid-Clare. Later, they lost, I suppose, they became subjects of the O'Brien clan when their influence grew from towards the west of the River Fergus.
Mm-hmm. So the River Boyne, it's a fertility god or goddess?
A goddess.
Okay, because funny you should mention that. When I was in Egypt with her indoors, she got out that day, we went to visit the pyramids, and there were people selling different tokens that you could bring home. And I was sold a very peculiar little statuette that had to do with fertility. It was this guy, Min, the fertility god in Egypt. I'm just wondering, is there any connection between Dim, I think his name, or Min, that's his name. He has one leg, one arm, and quite a large phallus, as you can see there. A fascinating replica of a statue that was made in Egypt. But funny you should mention that, because I just had it here handy. And I like to look at it sometimes. So the Boyne River, this is a goddess that promotes fertility.
Yes, there was rituals going back for thousands of years where people would have, I suppose, worshipped or performed a ritual in order to be blessed with a child, or yeah.
So would people go and cavort within the waters of the Boyne? Getting back actually to Sandra there, I mean, it ties in with skinny dipping, I presume. Was that a part of it? Reconnecting with the water spirits and the rest?
Well, was Sandra near the Boyne, or was she...
I think she said a lake, and she lives in Cavan, so maybe not the same thing, but I'm just surmising that maybe this was part of the ritual of the horizontal hokey pokey in a running river such as the Boyne. Sounds very exciting.
Yeah, well, maybe you should head down and try it sometime.
She wouldn't dream of it. Believe me, I've tried. Sorry, I've interrupted your story. Please continue. But Inion Baoigh.
Yes, so as I was saying, her center wasn't a church. It was a pagan it was a sacred pagan site, and it was actually recognized as sacred by the High Druids of Ireland at the time. And she had between 45 and 56 spiritual children who lived with her there.
Wow.
And they would have spent time in reflection and offering help for people in the community. And the work they did, there isn't as much information on it as we would like, but the impact they had on the local community must have been extraordinary, because there are countless locales that have been named in honor of Inion. There is Kilnaboy. Actually, part of that name they believe comes from Inion, and there are 17 holy wells that they have basically traced the roots to this lady who she was anointed a saint eventually by the church, and that was really because she was too important locally for them to be able to ignore her. Her impact was too significant for them to be able to.
She was pagan, though, was she?
Yes, she was.
So that's a very strange occurrence for the church to acknowledge her as a saint, yet she did not believe in the church's teachings. Would that be correct?
Well, it wasn't unusual, because there's a huge number of saints who would actually have their origin in much older stories and much older traditions in the communities across Ireland. And the church, really around the 12th century, in order to, I suppose, gain more control and to gain more influence, they had to get people to, I suppose, adhere to the church's teachings. And a big way to do that was to adopt these local practices and celebrate these local figures in order to be able to, I suppose, more easily transition people from paganism to Christianity. But there are undertones of paganism which have existed throughout up until recent times.
Fascinating, fascinating. So the church came in the 12th century and piggybacked on the stories that were there already, and more or less put their kind of Disney-esque sheen on these beautiful stories that lived for generations in Ireland. Would that be correct?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily compare it to Disney, but maybe Game of Thrones might be a more appropriate comparison.
Indeed. Inion Baoigh, what does it mean? Baoigh is yellow, I presume. What Inion? Do we have any?
Well, it was actually to do with her. The belief is that her father would have been. So Inion is daughter of, and then Baoigh is, as I said, would have been the wealthy man who served the local clan.
Of course, yes.
And there are disputes over the origin of the name. There's also another translation that would say daughter of madness, but again, there isn't clear evidence that was the case.
So, in terms of what significance this lady has in the area that you're talking about, tell us more about that. What is your direct feeling with regard to that energy, that person, that being today?
Well, I think most important was a huge thing to recognize with her was her importance for equality in the region between men and women, because this was a woman. This was a woman who basically ran her own center, and she did so without any. There was no question over whether or not she should possess it, and really, I suppose they felt confident and strong enough that they were able to have this center run entirely by women. They didn't have any issues regarding gender equality at the time in Ireland. And it was unfortunate that really later, as I mentioned, in the 12th century, there was a great deal of change, and a more patriarchal system was introduced to Ireland, whereas previously there would have been far less, I suppose, restriction placed on women in Irish society.
Those damned men. And I presume those meetings were held in a centre that was very clean.
I would imagine so.
Yes. Is that all you have on Inion Baoigh? Is there anything else you'd like to mention on her?
Unfortunately, there's only very limited information about her specifically, but the area where her site occupied, it's a very fascinating location, because, as I mentioned, they practiced goddess-based spirituality, and ultimately that was the end of that came around the 12th century in many parts of the country. But the one of the most interesting things was there's a story that she had a rock that she would sit out on, and it was a high point where she could look out over the countryside, and she would go there to meditate, and some people believed that she would commune with the gods or the other folk.
Now we're talking. What happened then?
Well, again, you have to leave it up to. I have to leave it up to your imagination.
How do you feel? How do you feel it went when she was communing with these otherworldly beings?
Well, as the daughter of a goddess, I imagine that there was times when she was needed to assist in their matters, and vice versa. She would have been a very important person in her area, and at present I'm doing further research into details of her life and possible journeys and adventures she had, and really, I suppose I cannot say more at the moment about what happened in her lifetime, as we're still piecing that together.
Of course. Do we have any pictures from that area that people, if they are visiting, whenever they get let, that they could go there and see?
Yes, so there's one particularly interesting piece that it's a Sheila na gig, which is placed over the doorway of the church in Kilnaboy. The church has been built on the site where her center was, and it was built around.
We have a picture here. We're going to put up that picture, as you can see it there. Yes,
it's
impressive looking structure there. So can you describe what we're looking at there, Bala, please?
Yes, so it's basically a sculpture of a hag with her vulva displayed. She's basically exposing herself, and this was called a Sheila na gig.
Where's the vulva? Just can you? I can't see it.
If you look at the bottom of the
right. Oh yes. Oh dear. She should have got that checked out. Only joking, folks. Yeah. So what was the significance of the hag displaying her vulva? Was it a threat? Was that a feminist, similar to bra burning back in the day?
So the reason it's over the doorway was in order to protect the entrance against evil spirits or figures with evil intent from entering the dwelling or the property. It also had another meaning where it was used as a fertility symbol and possibly as a part of a ritual. Well, not, and actually up until the 1960s, women actually went and
You should get together sometime, eh? Sorry, I'm interrupting. Go ahead. Go on.
So women actually did a pilgrimage, and they would spend the night from dusk till dawn circling the church and praying, and they would basically be praying to the Síle na Gig and to Inion Baoigh, and in return they would be basically asking to be granted the gift of a child.
Oh. And who was there to grant them that gift?
Well, I think they had to go home to their husbands or to their...
Oh, sorry. So they didn't come to a place where one guy was there to do the deeds, as it were.
Well, as far as I know, there wasn't. But you never know. I mean, it was happening until the 1960s. It's very possible that to some degree the tradition has continued. You'll have to stake it out at night to know for sure.
Well, I think with all this lockdown stuff going on at the moment, I'm sure some sort of a festival where people get together and have a fertility theme to it, where people could get together, maybe run down to a river or a lake and cavort. Maybe we could organize something like that, Balor. Of course, all safe, all legal. And that's something just to throw out there and see what kind of a reaction we get to that, because there is a lot of pent up physical and spiritual energy that needs to gush out, I think, when the time comes. Fascinating stuff as always.
Check my flow.
So the other bits of information we have on Inion Baoigh would be she was a very fierce and formidable foe if you got on the wrong side of her. And she did have a run-in with Saint Senan, where she took issue with the fact that he wouldn't allow women on Scattery Island. So she organized that women went by boat and arrived on the island, and basically she had a head-to-head with him, and they came to an agreement where she got her way.
She won the day. A fierce lady, no doubt. So they all went to that island, all these women, and just had fun. Was that the idea?
I'm sure they enjoyed it, and I'm sure they had work, and I'm sure they had a purpose beyond fun. But
of course, and I'm sure the island was very clean.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
Yes.
And then I suppose if I was going to talk about any other aspects of her site when she was there, she was well, during her time, there's evidence that it was an international pilgrimage site, and that is supported by the fact that the church decorated the church that they built there in the 1200s with a double-barred cross. A double-barred cross, there was only two of them in Ireland. They would have been known as the Cross of Lorraine. And the idea behind them was that they signified that a fragment of the true cross or a very powerful relic was stored within the building where this symbol was displayed. And people from all over Europe and Asia would have traveled over as part of a pilgrimage, and this region would have been a very, very significant stopping point on such a pilgrimage.
My goodness. So a lump of the relic is within this structure still to this day, you think?
The story is that inside the lower section of the cross, so possibly inside the stonework, is where the relic has been kept.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Have you ever visited yourself? Did you go there and maybe place your hands on the structure to see if you could get any messages from it?
I've been there many times, but what I found is what I found myself was a particular connection with the round tower. It's mostly destroyed. There's only the bottom 4 meters of it, but it was it was supposed to be a magnificent structure before it was destroyed by Cromwell's forces. And there are tales that there was an underground passageway leading out of the tower and into the hills nearby. And I mean, again, there's countless stories in the area that will tie it to Inchiquin and the Blood family, and the Blood family actually have a tomb inside the church.
Sorry, did you just say Blood family? A family named Blood. Their surname was Blood.
Yes.
Spelt B-L-O-O-D.
That's right.
Where did they get that?
Well, so they were brought in basically as landowners or land managers several hundred years ago by the English rule or the Protestant clergy. So they would have had some positions of authority. They would have had representatives in the Protestant clergy, and they have a mansion, which we can talk about again if there's time another day. There's an awful lot of history in the area, and you could spend several nights discussing it.
Bloody hell, we surely can.
But I suppose in keeping with the keeping the focus on the church, there is another interesting, I suppose, figure. There's this unidentified. It's a sculpture of some sort of a beast, but they don't seem to have. There doesn't seem to be any knowledge of what creature it's supposed to represent. So it's possibly something that it remains undiscovered, or a creature that remains hidden in the other world. Possibly if a portal was opened or a fairy fort was unlocked, you may be able to release it, or it may even be contained within the church itself. So it's again another mystery around the site where Inion Baoigh.
When you say a fairy fort to be unlocked, what do you mean by that? What is the process of unlocking a fairy fort? I think a lot of our viewers would like to know that.
Well, I think there's every fairy fort is different, and there is a different ritual for each one. But certainly, I have heard stories that the blood of Balor's line can unlock, but it requires a particular collection of objects. Like a fairy dagger and basically a stone, a particular stone, not of this world, for the ritual to be complete. But I suppose again we can talk about that more specifically maybe when we're discussing a particular fairy fort.
Absolutely, we could possibly carry out an experiment ourselves at some future date, and I'm sure many people would love to see and hear that. Now it's time for a new segment on the podcast where I ask Balor, what about today? What about the local gossip of today? What is happening in the area in terms of the occult and the people involved in nefarious goings-on in the area? Would it be fair to say that this is what this segment is?
Well, what I would say is strange things are always happening, and some of them are explained and some of them are mysterious. And I have taken to writing down my observations and really, I suppose, to showcase that these unexplained occurrences are happening even today. And there are mysteries that we're covering from 50 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, that could very well be tied to events today. And I came across something very interesting during the week on the outskirts of Venice. And
before you go on to that, this sounds like a time I need to get a drink, because I love the gossipy bits. So can we just pause? I'll get my drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy this little bit of gossip. Okay, can you just, if you just stand by, good man.
Okay.
Back in 2 minutes if you want to just, I don't know, just talk to the people there again, just to see what the, thank you.
Okay, people. while Malachy is away, I will clarify that it is not gossip, and that what I'm going to read for you are my notes firsthand of a conversation that I overheard, and something that I will certainly be investigating further in the coming weeks. And yeah, I think I can jump right in maybe and get into it. So it's basically, I saw some strange stuff since we were last speaking, Malachy. There is this wood on the outskirts of Venice where I like to go to meditate and reflect. I don't like to be disturbed, so I found a nice spot behind a tree away from the trails. Unfortunately, I wasn't alone. These two lads stomped through a thicket and stopped a few feet from where I was sitting. I was going to tell them to fuck off, but it looked like a private conversation. So I slid down to hide beneath the roots of the tree and have a quick listen. These guys must have been smoking something. The taller one was called Jerry, and the shorter one was called Ben. Jerry went to lean against the tree, puffing away, and Ben sat down with his walking stick between his legs. And from the sound of their accents, I would have said they were townies. Jerry had a softer voice, and Ben had a low, husky voice, which made him a bit harder to hear. Now, my notes, I didn't get quotes from these gentlemen. I suppose they didn't discover that I was privy to their conversation, but I think it is something that's important to share with a wider community, because for sure there are many of us who have witnessed and heard and felt strange things. And I think if we share this knowledge with one another, we will be able to see a bigger tapestry of information. And I suppose if you're ready, Malachy, I'll dive
Absolutely.
in.
Let's go. Ready to go now. Apologies, folks. I'm really looking forward to this bit, because there's nothing better than finding out bits of dirt on people that we will not name, but most of us may know. Let's go.
Well,
is it okay if I take some notes?
Absolutely. Yeah, take as many notes as you like,
and
I can answer all your questions at the end, Malachy, if you like.
Go for it, yes.
So I won't bore you with small details.
Oh, do.
The shorter man, Ben, was talking about something he saw when he was walking his dogs. Ben lives near the lunatic asylum in Ennis, so he walks the dogs around the grounds there. And he must have very large dogs, and they must be they must be incredibly energetic, because he didn't seem to be able to control them, and they took off away from him over towards the building. Gilla, the larger dog, found a broken window around the side of the asylum and jumped inside. Now, Ben says he had never seen this window before, despite living his whole life basically a couple of 100 yards from the asylum.
Okay.
He said the window was coming out of the ground on one corner of the building. And when he went to look inside, there was no sign of the dog. Now, it sounded like he was a very conscientious owner and very concerned for his animal, because he said that he tied up the other two dogs, and he climbed through the window and dropped into what looked like a boiler room. The room was black, pitch black, so he had to use the light from his phone to see. And what he immediately realized was that there was no door in the room in any of the walls. But what there was in the center of the room, to his left and his right, there were two tunnels or crawl spaces running beneath the asylum. The light from his phone didn't pierce through the darkness, so he couldn't see to the end of the tunnels. And he called out for Gilla to see which one the dog might have taken. And an eerie silence greeted him. He picked the left one when he noticed some of Gilla's fur around the lip of the crawl space. First, the walking stick he tossed inside, and he hoisted himself up into the crawl space and began to awkwardly move while keeping his hand raised with the phone to illuminate the path in front of him. So as he was crawling, it took quite some time.
Balor, sorry, can I just interrupt? This isn't a missing dog story, is it? This isn't just about finding the dog. There's something better coming. It's just...
No, it's
taking a while to get to the good bit. So, carry on.
So Ben crawled for ages until he came to a fork in the path, or in the crawl space. And the turn to the right, he could hear something in the distance. So he followed and soon saw a light ahead of him. He felt uneasy when he heard voices as he drew closer. And he decided to switch off the phone light and to silently creep closer until he got near the end of the tunnel. Peering out, he saw an open chamber lit by candles which threw up enormous shapes on the walls. Several robed figures were standing in a circle in the middle of the chamber, with a large metal chair planted in the center of the room. It looked like they were a cult from Ben's description. There were weird markings on the ground and the walls. The hooded figures were doing some kind of ritual, chanting and moving about. Ben could see a figure in the chair with short hair and covered in face paint, but the light was too dim for him to make out anything else. One of the figures in the circle suddenly turned and stared at the crawl space. Ben was sure he was invisible in the darkness. Even still, he felt it was time to retreat. There was no sign of Gilla in the room, but he was starting to worry about his own safety. As quickly and as quietly as possible, he moved back to the turn in the tunnel and headed for the boiler room. He thought he could hear or feel someone following him, so he kept moving as fast as he could and jumped out of the tunnel and landed awkwardly on his damaged feet. Without a second's hesitation, he leapt up to the window and scrambled out of the boiler room and into the clear light of day. The sun was out, and the dogs bounced around, excited to have been back with them. As he struggled to his feet, he felt a familiar nuzzling of Gilla in his ear.
Hang on,
sure enough,
where did the dog come from? Was the dog
So
not missing? She just
she must
appeared.
have taken, according to Ben's account to his friend, she must have taken the other tunnel and come back before him.
Ah.
And
She picked
relieved,
the right tunnel then, yes.
well,
The
I guess
correct
he
tunnel.
picked the wrong one. He didn't get his dog, but he found something else.
Well, had he gone the other way, it wouldn't have made a good story. So I'm glad he did take the tunnel that he took.
Well, if I speak to him, I'll pass on the message that you appreciate his error in choosing the wrong tunnel.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is a fascinating tale. And this man, is he able to speak about this? Obviously to yourself, but I'd love to have a little conversation with him.
Well, as I say, I was really, I suppose, privy to the conversation he had with his friend, but certainly if I come across him again, I could approach him and ask him about coming on to speak with you.
We've had a little bit of interference again there, Balor, and again, the interference only happens when you are talking about something very controversial. And I just wonder, there is a part of me that wonders, are the people involved in that cult, that circular ceremony that they were celebrating, are they attuned to our conversation now in some way and are trying to affect you getting this information out? Would you buy into that idea that you are being hunted by this group of occultists in your area?
I think we don't know what the cult, what their objectives are, or why they require secrecy. And I think it's best not to jump to conclusions before we have more information.
Very wise, sir. Very, very, very wise as always.
Now,
I think I interrupted the end of that. Did I?
Yeah, I can continue.
Yeah, please. Sorry. Do. Sorry. I just got a little overexcited when the dog appeared because we hadn't a notion where he went, and all of a sudden he's there, and there wasn't a tie. You know yourself. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on what happened in the story.
And you're obviously a dog lover, Malachy.
Of course, I was worried about the dog. Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, from what he said, it seemed the dog was absolutely was perfect. There was no issue with the dog at all. And relieved, he quickly gathered up the dogs and moved away from the asylum as fast as he could. He turned to look one last time at the window and saw a solitary figure staring at him. The hood was drawn back, revealing an angry painted face with what looked like blood or red paint around the mouth. Ben immediately took off into a run, grimacing at the intense pain as his thin legs banged down on the gravelled path.
Dear, oh dear.
He ran the dogs until he was home and collapsed on the grass in the front lawn. So it's a fantastic story, but Cherry didn't seem to buy it. His friend who he was telling it to. And he must have been a good friend because he didn't laugh at poor Ben, but he did ask how much weed Ben had been smoking, or if Ben had taken edibles recently.
He thought he was hallucinating and imagining the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know Ben personally, but maybe Jerry thought he'd done something like that before.
And tell me this, Balor, when Ben and Jerry get together, do they eat a lot of ice cream? I had to go there. I apologize. I apologize. It was just a little dump moment that I couldn't allow to escape this wonderful conversation. If you're finished, I think we're finished, Balor, for this week.
Well, there's one last detail which I thought was worth noting down from his tale.
Please.
So Ben insisted that his story was true, and Jerry asked him if he'd gone back to the asylum since. And Obviously, Ben is a very brave man because he did. But the window was gone.
The window is gone.
Yes, from what he said, it sounded like that window magically disappeared.
So wait now, is it a boarded up window now, or is it just a wall, or is that part of the building completely disappeared where the window was?
So it's the windows. The window is gone. So it's just it appears that it's just stone there now.
Do you think the members of this cult came along with bricks and mortar and old looking bricks, obviously, to build it up like it was part of the older building? And they did that overnight?
Well,
When their little meeting was rumbled?
I'm not sure. I'd be very interested to speak to Ben again. Well, to hear if Ben has been approached by anybody or spoken to anybody since.
Fascinating.
And I'd certainly be going to investigate myself.
Wonderful. Balor, may I applaud you, sir? May I applaud you? What an epic conversation we've had here tonight. And there is so much still to uncover. We're literally scratching on the surface of the Sahara Desert of your knowledge. And as the weeks and months and years go by, hopefully, we will learn more about our ancient past, our deep, deep. Sorry, I'm being I'm looking into your eyes, and I'm mesmerized by that stare. Can we just share a moment of staring? Somebody actually said I should try that a bit more. Tommy Tiernan does it a lot on his show, and when he stares intently, people seem to like that. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. What a moment. What a moment, ladies and gentlemen. And what a moment to end this week's podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. And please join us again on Deep Dive with Malachy Murray.